This conference will now be recorded.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope everybody had a good holidays, good Christmas, good Hanukkah, good everything. We only did the one program last week. We're only going to do one program this week also because once again it's a holiday week. A lot of people traveling, a lot of people got stuff going on. So we'll do our show today, and then we'll see you a week from today, next Monday. Uh, and today I'm taking a break from going through the citizens petition because something came up, and I wanted to share it with you guys. This is something you need to know. Uh, we only cover things here on this show that are of enough importance for you to know. Okay, the things that we cover here are things that if you are opioid dependent, in other words, when you try to stop taking the opioids, if you get sick, that's what opioid dependency is. If you're opioid dependent, what we're talking about here is the stuff you need to know. And I want you to take a second, look at the screen there. This is something I doubt any of you have ever seen before. At most, just one or two. This is a very kind of a rare thing. This is what's called a DNA melting plot, DNA melting curve, DNA melting point, whatever you want to call it. You're looking at it. This is the raw data as it comes off of the machine, off of the analyzer. This is what we look at in the lab. And I wanted you guys to take a look at this because Lord knows we're going to be talking about DNA curves and DNA melting curves and DNA melting points a whole bunch this coming year. Okay, and what I want you to see is that you're looking at a graph, and I want you to see how sharp the peak of that graph is, all the way up the top. Okay, I want you to look at how narrow and how sharp that graph is. In the lab, when we see things like that narrow, that sharp, we know we're looking at good data. And I don't care what you do, you know when you're looking at something when it's done right. Okay, if you're a carpenter, if you're a framer, you know when a house frame is right. Okay, you lay in brick, you know when the lines are right. You lay in concrete, you know when it's right. Okay, you cooking in the kitchen, you know when it's right. You're cutting hair, you know when it's right. Okay, you know when things are right. Okay, if there's something that you do and you do well, you know when it's right. I want you to just trust me when I tell you what you're looking at there, that's right. That's done right. Now, that's the DNA melting curve of people who are opioid naive, people who do not get sick when they take the opioids, people who've never really taken any opioids. Okay, what we're working on this week is the one that'll go next to it, which will be the DNA melting curve for people who are opioid dependent. Now, if what you people had was a mental health diagnosis, and that's what you've all been diagnosed with, you've all been told, oh, you're an opioid addict, you're a drug addict, you have opioid addiction, you have opioid use disorder. These are mental health diagnoses. Okay, now if you had a mental health diagnosis, your DNA curve would not be different. Okay, but in our people, their melting point from before they took the opioids compared to their melting point after they took the opioids, it's different. It's changed. Okay, the opioids changed the DNA. Okay, they changed it so much we can go in the lab and simply measure it. Okay, my guess is when we come back next week, hopefully, we'll be able to put these two curves up side by side. And I'm thinking that there's going to be 2.5, maybe even close to 3-degree difference in the melting curve of the opioid naive versus the opioid dependent, which in the world of melting curves, that's huge. That's a huge difference. Now, melting curves are used a whole lot in like people that do archaeology, people that do they'll go into a cave where the Neanderthals, the cavemen lived, and they'll ask hey, what did these cavemen eat? And there'll just be a bunch of crushed bones laying all around. They'll be like, these bones are all crushed. We can't tell what's what. We don't know what they were eating. Some of it may be deer, some of it may be rabbit, some of it may be horse. We can't tell. But they can take the DNA out of the bone, and the DNA of different species have a different melting point. It's that easy. You take all the bones and just put them into, you can just run one big sample and keep them separate, and it'll tell you what's what. It's really simple to do. Okay, this is not rocket science, DNA science, not rocket science, DNA science. This is not hard stuff to do. And that's kind of the point here. Okay, we're talking about off-the-shelf technology here. Now, as we build our DNA test, the way we're planning on building it is to have a screening test followed by a confirmation test. We know that all you guys are going to run into all kinds of doubting Thomases, people that are going to look at you and sneer, people that are going to go, oh, no, it's addiction. I don't care what the lab test said. I don't need a lab test to tell me what addiction is and what addiction is not. You're going to be hearing that stuff all day long. So we know we need a really rock solid test, which is why we combine a screen and a confirmation. When you run two separate tests on two separate pieces of equipment, it brings down the probability of a false, of an error, a false positive or a false negative. It runs down the possibility of an error. We want to be as accurate as we can be, because we know what we're up against. These people are making a fortune off of their diagnosis of opioid addiction and all the counseling and everything goes along with it. They're just stuffing money in their pockets with both hands. And when you're stuffing money in your pocket with both hands, it's hard to admit the truth. That's exactly what we're going to run into. So this will be part, hopefully, if all goes well, this will be part of the screen. We hopefully will know something in this week, first part of next week. So I wanted you people to look at the normal curve. Now, what we're hoping is the curve of the opioid dependent, the curve of our people that get sick when they try to stop taking the opioids, is going to look identical in terms of width and height, but just be shifted to the left a little bit, 2.5, maybe even close to 3 degrees. Different melting point, but just as accurate. That's what we're hoping for next week. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. Okay, you're going to hear us talk a whole lot about DNA melting points. One way to look at this, and then we'll close for today. We'll end for today. One way to look at this is the damage that was done to the DNA of our people. The damage that was done to the DNA of our people was so severe that when you go into the lab, the DNA of our people look like a separate species. We're using hardware and software that's used to distinguish one species from another. Is it a rabbit or is it a deer? That's the hardware and software that we're using. That's how much damage has occurred to the DNA of our people. We're using hardware and software that's normally utilized to distinguish between species, and we're using that hardware and software to distinguish between the opioid naive and the opioid dependent. That's how much change has occurred to our people. That's how much damage the opioids did to your DNA. When we take your DNA into the lab, it looks like the DNA of a different species, something other than human. My name is Dr. Doug Smith. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. Hope everybody had a good week last week. Please have a good week this week. And thank you. And we'll see you all again next Monday. Thank you.